up, guys? Alec Ankiri here. Today, I want to talk about squat depth. See, I catch a lot of shit about my depth from a variety of different places, and admittedly, I do often squat higher in training than would be acceptable in competition. It's not really the fact that people call me out on high squats that bothers me, though. I know what I'm capable of, and I also understand that missing your spot by an inch or two doesn't mean jack shit in the grand scheme of training or building strength or lifting in general. What does bother me though is the fact that the first motherfuckers ready to jump on your ass for high squats don't even know what proper competition depth looks like in the first place. You can argue all day about the merits of ass to grass squatting and how weightlifters are better because they squat to full depth and blah fucking blah, but I don't give a shit about weightlifting or which style of squatting you think is better. I care about powerlifting and becoming the best powerlifter I can be. And the fact is, depth has to be standardized in some way in order to make the squat a competitive lift. And personally, I think the rules as they're currently set forth in powerlifting are the best way to do that. Do they require you to squat to full depth? No, but that's an arbitrary concept that can't be measured. So people need to just let it go unless they're training for Olympic weightlifting. I blame the USAPL for this. They've created this influx of new and emerging lifters in the sport, which is obviously a good thing, and I applaud them for that. But at the same time, they're enforcing a notion on squat depth that isn't congruent with the rule as it's written in their own rule book. And all these new powerlifters see this and think, well, then that must be what proper depth is. The rules for squat depth in powerlifting state that the lifter must bend the knees and lower the body until the top surface of the legs at the hip joint is lower than the top of the knees. They either use this exact wording or something that means exactly the same thing in every federation I've ever looked at. I checked the rule books for the USAPL, RPS, USPA, APA, and GPC, and they're all exactly the same. The USAPL rulebook even has an accurate graphic indicating proper depth. Why then in practice do they make people squat below this depth in order to get white lights? The other prominent and well-regarded federations don't do this, and they don't have a rampant problem of high squats getting passed. A lot of people seem to think they do, but these are the same people that drank the USAPL Kool-Aid. So then, what does proper squat depth actually look like? First, let's take a peek at the very accurate graphic provided to us in the USAPL rulebook. Looks kind of shallow, doesn't it? If you've ever been to a USAPL competition in person, this is the exact type of lift they seem to make a point of red lighting. They've allowed the pendulum to swing too far in the other direction from the days when multiply quarter squats dominated powerlifting. But this is competition legal depth. Anything deeper is deeper than necessary and quite possibly taking pounds off your total. If we examine the key wording here, we only need to identify two things in order to be able to judge squat depth effectively: the highest part of the knee and the crease of the hip. So let's look at three different demonstrations and see if we can determine what should get white lights and what should get reds. This is a smidge shallow. The hip crease is in line with the top of the knee, but it hasn't passed it. This is what the average gym goer refers to as parallel. This should result in red lights, but things happen quickly, and if you're lucky, the judges may give you the benefit of the doubt. This is perfect squat depth according to every powerlifting rulebook I've ever seen. The hip crease has just passed the top of the knee, and in a perfect world, you get 3 whites every time. Per my own experiences, this seems to be the required depth the IPF/USAPL is shooting for. It's not quite what amateur enthusiasts would consider ass to grass, but with the hip crease several inches below the top of the knee, it's well beyond the technical requirements for depth as stated in the USAPL rulebook and depicted by their graphic. In my opinion, this is one of the primary reasons for all the confusion surrounding the topic of squat depth. The IPF and USAPL have enforced a standard that is not in line with their rulebook, a rulebook that's equivalent in terms to every other powerlifting rulebook when it comes to execution of the lifts. And because of this, they've created confusion among the influx of novices that they've brought to the sport, as well as created a group of elitist lifters who seem to think their federation is God's gift to powerlifting because they make people squat 2 inches deeper than everybody else, even though they refuse to reword their rule book to equate to their practices. Now, I just want to note that there's nothing inherently wrong with squatting well below parallel or stopping right at parallel. If you don't compete in powerlifting and you don't want to drop all the way to depth, that's your prerogative. You'll build plenty of strength and size regardless. And if you want to squat well below it, more power to you. But for powerlifting training and competition, hitting depth as stated by the rule book is of primary importance. And to go either too shallow or too deep is to do yourself a great disservice. I hope some people were able to learn a thing or two from this video, and I hope I didn't come across as too biased. It's not that I dislike the USAPL as a whole, I just dislike the way they go about certain things and the culture they've created surrounding themselves. However, I do have plans to compete with them in the future at some point, and if they red light my squats, so be it. Now, just a couple final points before I go. If you are being critical of someone's depth and it's not egregious, make sure you take a few things into account. Most importantly is camera angle. Unless you're looking at a side view angle filmed from knee height with the camera in a line that's perfectly perpendicular to the floor, then the camera is going to play tricks on you and make it impossible to accurately judge depth. A front, back, or high up angle will never look deep. You can't even see the hip crease from the front. There's a reason that the side judges are the ones primarily responsible for calling depth in competitions, but internet judges try to make front view calls all the time. Also, don't let the quads fool you. The larger the quads, the shallower the squat is going to appear to be, especially if you're inexperienced and paying attention to the thighs themselves rather than the hip crease. Lastly, if the lifter is wearing athletic shorts or pants in training rather than a competition singlet or tights of some sort, it's almost impossible to accurately gauge where the hip crease is, as the cloth is going to bundle up around it at the bottom of the squat, and all you can see is the quadriceps muscles protruding upwards, giving the illusion of a squat that's shallower than it actually is. So ultimately, it's all these things combined. Camera angles, large quads, training attire, not knowing what to actually look for to judge depth, the unrealistic expectations set about by the IPF and USAPL, and even willful ignorance that collectively are responsible for the gigantic clusterfuck of arguments over squat depth on the internet. But the rules themselves are pretty cut and dry, and that's something no one can argue with. Anyway, that's all I got for now, guys. Please make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.